And I have yet to meet a single engineer who doesn't get it immediately.
Right.
You know, it's a very simple technology. It's really simple. It's a miracle that nobody's invented it previously. I believe that EarthBuilt is going to do for construction what the internet has done for communication, and is to house humanity, not just the wealthier part of humanity, but them included. Our plan is over the next 10 or 12 years to build 100 million homes. And their primary goal is still to make money, and large amounts of it, for their investors, because they know that 9 out of 10 of their investments are going to fail. I took off to see the world. And I had this idea that, you know, I wanted to learn about magic. And so I set out into the world to learn about magic. I wanted to learn the truth about magic, and I certainly did. I mean, we knew it was going to happen, but we had no idea just how scary that would be. We didn't anticipate when we were testing our machine was just how terrifying a machine working at that speed, producing something that's as hard as rock. Having a business background would be an incredible advantage, but that's not the way that the cards have been dealt. I've been dealt a royal flush as far as the technology is concerned. It's good for everything. You know, it really is the best technology for construction that we will have for centuries to come.
Quick shout out to all startup founders. This message is just for you. Now, talking to other founders was by far the best way I found to learn and solve problems. Our startup founder groups bring together 8 to 10 founders to tackle challenges, solve problems, and get valuable feedback from peers who understand the startup grind. Visit failwisdom.com and click on Startup Founder Groups to learn more and to join us. Jan Golembiewski, welcome to the Fail Wisdom podcast.
Hey, Paul King. Thanks very much for having me on.
It's great to have you on. You've got a really, really interesting story. Lots of stories, and particularly one when you were 18 years old, you went on an amazing adventure where all sorts of things happened. We'll get into that later in the show. But I'm really interested to have you on as well because your company, EarthBuild's, has invented some new technology for the construction industry. I'll get you to talk a bit about that, and also your background within architecture and psychology and how that all came to fruition.
Absolutely. So EarthBuild, which is the product that our company is named for, was an invention that I had in 2019 after dwelling on it for about 15 years. I've been trying to figure out this really simple problem for about 15 years when I went, actually, it doesn't need to be a complex answer. It needs to be a really simple answer. And I just had a brainwave when I was driving, and I went home and I drew it out, and I could see immediately that it was going to work, and that this technology, when fully developed, was going to revolutionize building forever. I believe that EarthBuilt is going to do for construction what the internet has done for communication. It's going to make it very fast and very cheap, so that the shell of a building, what we call the home or the building itself, is going to become the cheapest part of the building. The windows and the electrical fittings and the plumbing is going to end up as the more expensive part, and we can get the shell for free. And it's largely by using a circular economy. We're going to be able to use waste materials, what's scraped off the site to make the home in the first place, or a basement, or some nearby tunneling or mining or whatever it is, that where we can collect that waste product, and instead of paying to dump it somewhere, that those payments can go to the builder, and that will be absolutely sufficient to build the shell of a home. And our technology is going to be fast. It's going to be really fast. Um, in fact, a lot of our stress points are going to be in trying to slow it down because at its maximum speed, it's going to be about the speed of 500 workmen all working together in perfect harmony, which means that we can build a home in half a day. We'll probably slow that down so that we can wait for plumbers and electricians and goodness knows what to come on and do their bits. But it's also what we didn't anticipate when we were testing our machine was just how terrifying a machine working at that speed, producing something that's as hard as rock, can be, because it's literally spitting out this material at such a pace. So our machine's a 3D printer, and it moves around. It actually uses the wall itself, whatever it's building, as its track. And so it moves around the building site more or less autonomously, producing more wall as wherever it goes, like toothpaste coming out of a toothpaste tube. So it like spews out one layer on top of another, except not soft like toothpaste, but hard like brick. And it's the continual layers, one over another, and they're more or less the proportions of double brick. And so when that stuff is spewing out at 50 kilometers an hour, I mean, we knew it was going to happen, but we had no idea just how scary that would be. And so during the R&D process, we're just having to slow it right down. And as we develop our technology and make it safer and stronger, we're going to be able to bring it up in speed so that eventually a builder can build, I don't know, several hundred houses a year.
Wow. And so instead of using the traditional, like in Australia, we use the wooden frame and brick. Other countries, they use concrete with metal in it. So you're seeing this substance that's created from whatever's around, and then no need for bricks or concrete or anything like that.
Yes, that's exactly right. So wherever you go in the world, and I've been an architect for a long time, and I've worked all over the world. Wherever you go, you've got different building paradigms. In America, in the States, where they have lots of earthquakes, most of the construction's in timber frame because masonry doesn't last very well. In Australia, we have timber houses that sit inside a brick shell because we want houses that look like they're made out of brick, but in fact they're made out of timber. In India they have brick homes with concrete corners, etc. So whatever those building paradigms are, our technology is going to be faster and cheaper. And the very fact that it's faster and cheaper means that it will become a preferred paradigm wherever it goes, especially as it is very earthquake proof. In fact, it's one of the things that's been tested for.
It's interesting. I was about to ask you about that. So yeah, well, that's really important. There's been a few earthquakes. Well, there's always earthquakes happening all around the world. And I lived in LA in 1990, and I was, I think it was like a 5.4 earthquake, and in the apartment I was in, it was just moving everywhere. But the whole of LA, hardly anybody was injured because there's all built in an earthquake-proof way. So, and then other cities where there's an earthquake and the whole city comes down and thousands of people are killed.
So the precedent technology for EarthBuild is a product called Super Adobe, which has had about 25 years of testing in LA. It was being tested when you were there, and in all the earthquakes since. And it's also been put on great big shaking machines, and it's very earthquake proof because it doesn't stabilize the particles that make up its substance using any glues or cement. So it's not a monolithic mass that we're that we're building on. It's more like a pile of particles that are all bound together in an external membrane. And so when they're shaken, like in an earthquake,
Yeah.
it becomes something called the non-Newtonian fluid. It becomes hard whilst it's being shaken. I'm not sure if anyone's ever experimented with cornstarch and water.
Oh,
You
yeah.
mix cornstarch with water and you hit it with a spoon and it goes hard.
Mhm.
But if you take the cornstarch and water and you try and stir it slowly, it's suddenly a fluid. That's called the non-Newtonian fluid. And the particles inside the EarthBuild's or Super Adobe are non-Newtonian fluid. So you shake them and they go hard, and then you stop shaking them and they settle and they heal. Any cracks in there, because it's a fluid, just heal. And so you don't get permanent damage from earthquakes, and yet you get the rigidity at exactly the moments where you require it.
That's amazing. Wow. Just recently I saw on the news as well, there was tornadoes in the States. Do you think it would be tornado proof or better to be in that?
Yes, of course. So tornadoes are particularly dangerous with wooden framed buildings because they're very lightweight,
Yeah.
and a tornado will pick them up and throw them around. With EarthBuild, it's a massive structure. It's like double brick. It's very, very solid and is much less prone to being picked up and thrown around. As well as that, it's very stable against lateral loads, which are loads that come from the side. So if a tree whacks into it, you'd much prefer to be in a house that's solid rather than one which is essentially hollow, like a wooden framed home.
Sounds like it's better in every single way.
No, not in every single way. Against reinforced concrete, it doesn't have the same sorts of compressive strengths, but we're working on that. It doesn't have the same vertical tensile abilities that concrete has. So we haven't quite figured out how we're going to make towers yet, but our technology is going to be incredibly cheap, especially against things like concrete, and very, very fast. And so engineers are going to very quickly start working on how they can use our technology to build those towers. And they're going to figure it out because that's where the money is.
And yeah, at the moment, I know that building costs are really, really high. That's particularly here in Australia, the cost of building a house is extremely high and not really affordable for many people. So anything that can lower that cost will be huge, I think.
Well, we're not just planning to lower the cost of buildings. For about 5% of the homes that EarthBuilt creates, we're planning to give them away for free.
Wonderful.
And in addition to that, when people are buying a premium home out of EarthBuilt, they're also going to be, as part of that package, they're going to be buying a home for a family that needs it somewhere in the world.
That's amazing. Wow.
Our plan is to house humanity, not just the wealthier part of humanity, but them included. Our plan is over the next 10 or 12 years to build 100 million homes. Many of those are free. And in doing so, give the world the social and environmental benefits of EarthBuilt. And those social benefits are obviously housing. People need houses, and the moment we've got more houses, there's less domestic violence and there's less crime. It takes one of the major stresses of people's personal finances because homes are very expensive. So there's massive social benefit to be had, but environmental benefits as well, because our EarthBuilt homes don't add to the carbon footprint, whereas materials like brick, concrete and steel add enormously. Brick is estimated to be between 2 and 3 of all the world's carbon emissions. Concrete is estimated to be around 8%, and steel another 5%. And so once it's all added up, it's a huge amount of the world's carbon footprint just goes into construction. And most of those things can be replaced with EarthBuilt. And so by building out of EarthBuilt, instead of those materials, we're going to be displacing those materials. And with 100 million homes, we're going to displace about a gigaton. That's about 2% of the world's emissions.
Wow.
And we're also going to be able to, the basic mass of the building is clean waste, which would otherwise go to landfills. And so with 100 million homes, we're going to be able to save an amount of landfill sufficient to fill the Grand Canyon.
And how are you going to get to that, those 100 million houses?
Yeah, so the EarthBuilt model is that we're going to produce machines, and with every machine that we produce, we're going to have local franchises all over the world. We've got patents all over the world, and we're going to have local franchises all over the world, and they're all going to be local. So people will be licensed to use that machine within a certain geographic radius. And that geographic radius will be chosen because there'll be sufficient need in that radius, and also sufficient amounts of clean fill in that radius. And also, have to have decent relationships with the authorities that do the approvals, and all the details. So where those franchises are, that's where we're going to start building. So, and we're going to be able to build very, very fast.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of those places, as I said earlier, are going to be free. So there's going to be no shortage of demand. We anticipate that our biggest log jams are going to be in producing enough machines to send them out to our franchisees.
Are these machines expensive to build?
It's a bit like in pharmacy, actually. The first pill is incredibly expensive to produce. That first dose costs tens or even hundreds of millions to produce, and every subsequent pill costs just a few cents. It's a bit like that with EarthBuilt. The MVP and the first prototypes and the first print runs in the machinery factories are going to be very expensive, but they're going to get cheaper and cheaper. And we anticipate that we should be able to bring the price down to more than that, 20 to 30,000, maybe 50,000 or 60,000 per machine. We're not exactly sure. The delivery mechanism hasn't been fully designed yet, but we're on our way.
Right. And have you been getting investment to do all of this?
Yeah, I'm seeking investment right now. We have one investor, and I have a couple of other investors who are in the wings, who have promised investment. In fact, more than a couple, at least 3 or 4 who have promised investment. I just have yet to see their checks. So there has been investment, and we're getting more. And I think that the people who have invested and who are investing are all incredibly smart people who understand the benefits and understand that this is going to be a big bang disruptor, and they just want to be part of it. And not all of them want to do it just because it's going to be profitable. They'll acknowledge that that's part of it, but they also want to be part of this sort of great big wave of doing good for the world. We're going to be good for the environment. We're going to be good for people.
Yeah.
We're going to be, we're here to do good. We're a B Corp constitution where we have ethics as our absolute foundation. We're here to do good, and those investors want to be part of it.
Yeah, I love that. These are the founders that I love to interview for good and doing something good in the world. And I think it's pretty amazing, really. It's a win-win-win what you're doing at the moment. But of course, startup world is not easy. It can be, a real roller coaster ride. So tell us a bit about, the start of this and what your journey was like, and also some of the obstacles or failures that you had along the way and what you learned from that.
Oh, to say it's been a roller coaster ride is it's a kind of shortcut, really, isn't it? The real trick with being in a startup is that people like myself are being forced to learn a whole set of skills and a whole language, which is a second language to us. The reason why we're in a startup is because we've invented something in a world apart from the startup world, and we have to make it into a business. And we have to, and look, it's not the first business. This isn't my first rodeo as far as starting a business is concerned, but EarthBuild isn't just starting a business. We're starting a really capital intensive business with massive ambition. And imagine that you're suddenly in a position where you have to create a business that's going to be bigger than Coca-Cola, right? And you've got plans to be bigger than Coca-Cola within 3 or 4 years, right?
It's healthier as well.
Sorry?
Hopefully healthier than Coca-Cola.
Yeah, I mean, but I'm just saying, EarthBuild is going to be absolutely huge, and to be able to have not just the vision that can propel that exponential growth, and I'm not talking about growth of money, I'm talking about growth of interest and awareness. To have that kind of vision that can propel that kind of growth is a mindset that I've never known I've ever had to deal with, and it's been really tough. And people who have capital and who want to release that capital appear to have these games that they play with us founders. We have to pitch in formats that they like, and like you're given a minute, right? What's a minute, and why do I have to line up with somebody who's got a business which is the next Uber for lipstick, right? I can't quite understand why people can't go, hang on a second, let's sort the wheat from the chaff first before we do this process. But that's the way it is. These are the games that we have to play as founders. I have to line up. Sorry?
I've got an idea. What if we get these founders on a podcast and they tell their story?
Okay. Then we have to get people to listen to the podcast, and then we're really going. Yeah. Okay. I'm into it.
Yeah, no, it is. Yeah, it's really, startup world is very difficult, and that wasn't my background either when I came into it. Actually, interestingly, I was interviewing a medical doctor who was doing something in the end of life care space, and it was a real, totally new experience for her. Really, really difficult. Had to learn all this new stuff that she. As I said, sometimes I'm in a conference and I'm Googling stuff, what does this mean? And, I think we've all done that. But, yeah, you might be at the top of your profession, but then doing a startup, it's just a whole different world.
It's suddenly you're back in, first year undergraduate in a field that you don't know so much about. I mean, I knew a bit about it because I had taught at UTS in a degree called the Bachelor of Creative Intelligence and Innovation. And so I was quite well practiced in tutoring students to really innovate.
Okay.
So the innovation side of things was easy. It only took me 15 years to, come up with the idea of EarthBuild, where for humanity it took 10,000 years for them to come up with the idea of EarthBuild. So the innovation side of things was not so tricky. It's turning it to a business, and I've never done a business degree. And when I started this, I didn't know what capital expenditure was. I didn't really know what a VC was, except in the most abstract terms. I certainly didn't know where their money came from, or what hoops they have to jump through in order to get money to us. I didn't know that they who they represent, for example. I assumed that VCs were just very, very rich people that wanted to throw their money out in on that Uber for lipstick that I just mentioned earlier. And I've since learned that money is much more scarce than I ever imagined, and that the venture capitalists are looking after other people's money, and they're making promises in advance of going and seeking opportunities to spend that money, and they've got to do the right thing by their investors.
Yeah, yeah. And we also saw each other, I think, a week ago at another conference that was held by the French Society, and they were talking
French
about
Tech, yeah.
French Tech, and they were talking about investment over there, which is very different, for example, to the US or Australia. So they're saying, I think, for example, in France, it's all about, which I think you really suit your tech. It's all about the actual technology and the science and all of that. Whereas in America, it's all about marketing and sales and the wow factor and all that sort of thing. Have you thought of getting investors from overseas?
Yeah, I have. It's not too easy when you're in Australia, and I've reached out to investors overseas. I've reached out to a couple in the Netherlands and a couple in the USA and a couple also in India. And so far, no dice. There's interest. No VC wants to close the book and say, look, we're just not interested. They don't do that.
No.
They all want to leave at least one foot in the door in case something becomes good later. But I'm a long way away from all of them. I have patents in all those territories, and so I have a real interest in getting investment from all those territories. And one of the people who has promised investment is Dutch, and he has also promised to bring his best friend and co-investor in from the Netherlands as well. So we'll probably get some European investment. And I agree with the people that were speaking at the French Tech, which is part of the Climate Action Week. The French investors, and probably most of the European investors, are technophiles. They want to know about the technology, and as you're right, the Americans want to know about the hyperbole. But everybody, in truth, needs to know that it's going to work. And I'm kind of lucky in one regard, and that is that I've had to explain my idea to literally hundreds of engineers and architects now. And I have yet to meet a single engineer who doesn't get it immediately.
Right.
It's a very simple technology. It's really simple. It's a miracle that nobody's invented it previously.
Well, yeah, the whole startup space is really difficult in funding as well. And one of my ex-mentors, he was successful key startups. He said, "Well, if you're going to go and look for investment, you'll have to do it full time for at least a year." That's why we have to bootstrap. But having said that, and also talking about business background, that's easy to manage. I see that startup founders that have a business background have a huge advantage, and particularly ones that are in the business development or i.e. sales, marketing area. That is I think, the best skill that you can have as a startup founder. So you might have the best technology in the world, which you may well have, but it's the guy that comes along and knows how to market and sell, or you really need to put a lot of money into that marketing and sales and business development as well.
You're right, Paul. Having a business background would be an incredible advantage, but that's not the way that the cards have been dealt.
Yeah.
I've been dealt a royal flush, as far as the technology is concerned. It's good for everything. It really is the best technology for construction that we will have for centuries to come. But I don't have that kind of a back. I've been in business, but a small business, my own architectural office. You can see it around me. That's my drawing table, right? I'm old fashioned. I draw with pencils and tracing paper.
Yeah.
And so this whole game is really very new to me. And I was speaking to some investors last night, and they were saying, "Oh, you need to get your family and friends to invest." And I'm thinking to myself, "You haven't met my family and friends. My mum is on a pension, and she's struggling to make do with just her pension because it's not quite enough to pay her mortgage, right?" And she's, in her mid-80s, and, there's no asking her for investment, right? My brother, my other brother, my sister, no one's got any money.
Yeah.
When we're talking about, we don't even have money to go and, we struggle to take a train somewhere in my family.
And there is a big gap between, family, mums and dads type of, investment, and then the VCs, and there's a big gap. But there are groups like Lend for Good, guys like Cameron Neal.
I'm going to have to write these names down because I've never heard of Lend for Good.
Yeah, they're in that place, and they talk that sort of mid-tier as well, particularly in obviously businesses or startups that are doing good. And yeah, there's a few like that. I think there are other investment groups that where green or sustainability is really important as well. And so I think
but usually their primary goal is still to make money and large amounts of it for their investors, because they know that 9 out of 10 of their investments are going to fail. And so they have to rely on that 10% that are going to succeed in order to carry the rest. And so their primary goal still has to be financial. And yes, armed, the environmental thing has to be the upside.
Now, you're saying before that you still draw, by hand, which is easy, and you're sort of, a very analog type of person, we could say, more than digital, and you've also lived off the grid. Is that right? Can you tell us?
Absolutely. I mean, you should have seen me during COVID, especially the second part of the second COVID lockdown for New South Wales.
Yeah.
I spent the whole time in the bush. I didn't even have a light switch.
Right.
The only electricity we had was we had a generator, which we use sometimes, and batteries. And I just spent the whole time outdoors and wet. And I loved it, but it was very off the grid. And I grew up off the grid too. I grew up in New Guinea. So I was quite familiar with it, but New Guinea is much warmer.
Yeah. Well, tell us about that experience. So tell us about your background. So, why did your parents go to New Guinea, and what was your experience like there?
So, my stepfather, my father died in 1970 something. My father died. I think 1978.
How old were you?
9 years old. Does that make sense? Does that add up? Maybe it was 1977 that he died. He died in the 70s. I was a kid. And my mother remarried an anthropologist. My father was hit by a car. My mother remarried an anthropologist. And this anthropologist needed to go and do his field work in Papua New Guinea. And being newly married, my mum wasn't going to just let her husband go off into the wilderness of Papua New Guinea without her and without her family and her 3 kids. And by then she was pregnant and having a fourth to him. And so all four of us kids trucked off with them to go and live in a grass hut in a village in the middle, right in the dead center of Papua New Guinea.
Oh,
And it was awesome. But one of the things that I had to do then was build, because as a villager in New Guinea, we build for everybody who needs a house. It's always a communal activity, a bit like an Amish barn raising. And so my first experience of really building something was building a house that my sister could live in.
right.
And
That's
so I've been building like since I was 11.
yeah. Tell us more about the experience there. Like, what was life like every day living in that village, and how did it affect you as a child?
Well, I mean, I think probably the most important thing is that it's very different. Different expectations,
Yeah.
different ideas, different motivations. New Guinean people are incredibly intelligent. When I think about New Guineans, I go, if there was a race that just has natural intelligence, it's probably them. It's just that they're very, very late to colonialization, and so they kind of got left behind because they're in an island. And so and also very mountainous island. So that even now they don't have good road linkages. You can't get from the south of New Guinea to the north by road. You have to go by air. So it's a difficult terrain for communication, and so they had to work out other things. And they're really extraordinary people, and they see the world very differently. Naturally, because their culture is incredibly different. And when I rejoined Western society after living in New Guinea, I just never saw the world the same way as my peers and colleagues. And I still don't. I question everything, and I guess that has allowed a certain amount of curiosity, and I'm always looking on the outside. As Bob Dylan said, on the outside of every side there is. And that kind of gives you a perspective that is a bit different. And perhaps that's one of the reasons why I came to EarthBuild, because I see things differently.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really important part of being a founder, I think, like seeing things differently, like you have this sort of future vision as well. To like, instead of thinking, this is the way things work, you think, no, this would be better, doing something in another way, a different way. So, having different ideas about how things can work. So it makes sense how that. So it's interesting. It's always, the way that we grow up, what happens in our life really makes who we are today. And I can see how that links so much with what you're doing at the moment. But I guess people from New Guinea are very much in touch with nature and the earth.
Yeah,
More than
yeah, and I am. I spend a lot of time in the bush. Here in Australia, I spend a lot of time in the bush. I know it well. I my home is a tree house. This one, not this one. This is my Sydney office, which is a house. But in my tree house, I live not even 30 centimeters away. My bed is not even 30 centimeters away from the trunk of a great big ironbark, and I get to spend such intimate time with that ironbark. I know how it works. I know how the water, when it rains, circulates in an anti-clockwise way down to the roots, and how the pith in the bark absorbs water and holds it for later, for when there are dry times. I kind of know things about the tree that most people don't, because of the intimacy I have with nature. And perhaps there is some New Guinea in that. Perhaps the reason why I live in a home like that is because I crave it after living in New Guinea. I don't know. But what I do know is that my relationship with the country is very much part of my EarthBuild story. When I first started thinking about using Super Adobe, well before it had been developed into EarthBuild, I did so because I was designing a building for some Aboriginal people. And it was very important to me and very important to them that the materials that we were using were intrinsic to the site, that they were from country, because people from Indigenous Australian communities, the relationship with country is intrinsic. It's not something extra. And my clients really didn't want building materials that were imported from elsewhere. They didn't want tiles from China.
Yeah. Yeah.
They wanted something that really represented their country, them. And they really strongly expressed not just a connection with country, but a non-difference with country. We are our country, they said.
Right.
And so I wanted to build out of their country and not damage it. Yeah, sure, I could take their sand and mix cement into it, and yeah, it would be mostly their country, but it would be polluted and damaged forever. I wanted to take their earth and not damage it. And so that's why I started looking at Super Adobe very seriously. And that project never happened.
Super Adobe?
Super Adobe is a technology that was developed in the very late 1980s by a guy called Golembiewski, and an academic who moved to California called Golembiewski, and an architect. And they're basically sophisticated sandbags with earth in them rather than sand.
Okay.
Compressed earth bags. And our technology is a bit like Super Adobe, except smaller, tighter, more compressed, and more continuous, and machine made, more regular.
Yeah. Well, so you grew up in New Guinea, partly, and then you came back to Australia. I think you lived in Canberra, is that right?
Yeah, I lived in Canberra. I lived in Canberra. That's where my stepfather was doing his PhD at ANU.
Yeah. And so when you were 18, what did you get a bit bored? You always think, oh, I need to.
When I left school, I started university, and I just immediately started university. Like after the holidays, which I spent overseas, I went straight to university, and I just couldn't bear it. I needed to break free, and I hadn't broken free yet. And so I took off to see the world. And I had this idea that, I wanted to learn about magic. In New Guinea, where I'd grown up, a certain and very informative part of my youth, belief in magic isn't like belief in wizards and, Harry Potterish stuff. It's much more intrinsic, and it's not that they believe in magic, it's just that they don't totally subscribe or even know about an empirical view of the world. And so I was growing up with these two totally conflicting ideas. One side, very informed by the Enlightenment, the European Enlightenment, very rational, very scientific, and the other side, completely without that. And I wanted to know who was right, because I couldn't see any compelling evidence that either was right. And so I set out into the world to learn about magic. I wanted to learn the truth about magic, and I certainly did. I learned all sorts of things about magic as I went traveling, and I got into a great deal of trouble as I started experimenting with that magic. I spent some time with a Rastafarian mystic in the Caribbean who was Andy is one of the most incredible people that I've ever met. I'm still his friend. We still communicate with each other, and you know, I had to, after leaving him, I had to put all my learnings to good use. And good is a good word, because he was somebody who was just a good person. And all of his magic stemmed from the fact that he was good and believed in good. And so I had to start sort of imbibing that. And it's not a natural characteristic to people brought up in the West.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we're brought up in the West with this very extractive mindset, where we see resources as potentially ours, or, you know, as something that we can exploit. And it's not a great outlook. It's not very good for the environment. It's not very good for other people. And so I really took it upon myself to just start practicing being good all the time, as much as I possibly could. And you know, it's taken a few years, I guess, but I genuinely believe that that's how I tread on the earth now. I'm here to do good.
Okay. Then let's just let's reverse it then, and let's just go. When you set out on this journey to do good, things happen, like you were deported from Mexico, you were beaten up in Guatemala, and you were made a slave as well. So can you tell us that story, because it's pretty amazing? So,
well, that's a lot of stories, and if people want to look around, they'll probably find some other podcasts about that. I've been interviewed by ABC Radio National on that, and several other radio stations and podcasts, and you can even look up Magic, my book, on Spotify or Audible. But it's a 300-page book. I mean, I could jump to the end and give you all the spoilers, but all of those things are true.
Yeah.
My story is a true one, and it's a wonderful story, and very engaging. But really, we don't have the time for it here, and anyone who's interested, I shouldn't be giving you spoilers now.
Okay, so yeah, get your book Magic available on Amazon and all that. Just
good bookstores in Australia will have it as well. Or if you don't want to read the hard copy, you can go to Audible or Spotify.
Yeah, it'll be a fascinating read. Okay, wonderful. Well, so I guess just to finish off, what have you learned about yourself doing this startup?
To learn a great deal of patience, actually. There have been a few times when I've realized that my own acceleration, my own desire to see this happen fast, has sometimes felt like I've left the world behind me, and I've had to often slow down and just let the others catch up, because I'm always way ahead. And that's part of that is being a company of one plus all my fellow travelers, all of whom have companies of their own and are doing their own thing. When you're very small, you can be very dynamic. You know, you can change and pivot at a moment's notice, and you don't have that kind of deep stability that's needed. Sometimes you need to be a great big tanker taking a single trajectory through a huge ocean, and not a little canoe that can move around, very agile but not very fast. So I've had to learn to, although I am a little canoe, I've had to learn to be a bit more like a tanker, to take a single line and hold it, even when I've wanted to pivot.
Yeah, the whole question of pivoting is interesting, and sometimes you do need to pivot. You know, it's just
Oh, and I have
it's
a massive pivot, but I've done it once, whereas my inner world would have me pivot once a day.
Okay. Yes, that's a little bit much. Okay, interesting what you've learned about yourself. All right, well, look, I wish you all the best. It's a really important technology, EarthBuilt. So, you know, let's hope that you get the right investors on board, because I'm sure you will, because it's such an important thing that you're doing, and, you know, it's going to help so many people.
Thanks so much, Paul.